The Philadelphia Eagles finished the 2024 season with a 14-3 record and won the second Super Bowl in their franchise's history. They decimated nearly everyone in their path on the way to winning Super Bowl 59, and they only had one playoff game of the four they played within single digits, which of course was a 28-22 win over the Rams in the divisional round. They outscored the Commanders and Chiefs in the NFC Championship game and Super Bowl by a combined 95-45 and cemented themselves as one of the most dominant teams ever. And for as dominant as they were in 2024, a lot of the time their game plan was pretty simple. Run the ball, don't turn the ball over, play good defense, and move on. And after entering their Week 5 bye with a 2-2 record, they did not lose a game the rest of the year that Jalen Hurts started and finished. And for as dominant as they looked in January, this team still went through a bit of adversity as Birds fans and the Philadelphia media certainly hold their guys accountable. But as we know, the Eagles were a well-oiled machine by the time January rolled around. And as we enter the 2025 season, even with some of the players the Eagles lost this offseason, they are not going anywhere, and they can absolutely repeat as Super Bowl champions. And in today's video, we are going to break down the 2025 Philadelphia Eagles roster and season ahead. And if you could like the video, I would really appreciate it as it helps out tremendously with the YouTube algorithm. And for all of southeastern Pennsylvania, go Birds, and now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing some of the players the Birds lost in free agency, and we will start with Milton Williams, who signed a $100+ million contract with the Patriots this offseason. Now, if you are new to the channel and are watching for the first time, one thing we preach regularly is that a lot of the time, rarely is it one person's success or failure, and that is exclusively on that said player. And we bring this up with Milton Williams to say that he had a good year in 2024 and was rightfully compensated. But that doesn't mean he's a completely irreplaceable one-of-one player, because he's not. Milton had a good year last year, and the 2 sacks he had in the Super Bowl will be in the Eagles' highlight reel forever, and as they should be. But one thing with the Eagles, and why I am so high on general manager Howie Roseman, and have been for years, is he always has a plan. So while I wish Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, Darius Slay, Isaiah Rodgers, and everyone they lost this offseason success in their new homes, none of those guys were absolute franchise cornerstones, and if they were, well, you see the way the Birds spend money for players when they need to, and losing both Milton Williams and Josh Sweat may have an impact early in the year, especially as someone like Moro Ojomo steps up into a bigger role in 2025, but the point is the Eagles will be just fine. And one thing you may not know about the 2024 Eagles is this was not a defense that was a very sack-heavy team to the point where if they didn't get a sack, they were going to be gashed all game long. No, and they actually finished the year with a total of 0 players recording 10 sacks or even 20 quarterback hits. And this plays into why I'm not worried about the Eagles losing some players on defense. I really thought Nolan Smith stepped up as the year went on, and Jalen Carter is, of course, Jalen Carter, but Nolan Smith is in line for a huge year this year, and I think he is going to break out in a big way. And I also think this is why Howie Roseman was fine with letting Josh Sweat walk, was because he has Nolan Smith as the next guy up, as well as 2024 draftee Jalix Hunt, and even veteran pass rushers in Azeez Ojulari and Josh Uche too. And whenever the Eagles were losing their guys in free agency, I had no worries that they were going to figure it out, which they of course did. And one of the reasons the Eagles have been so successful over the past few years is they know how much depth it takes to get to the Super Bowl, and by having a guy like Vic Fangio call plays, maximizes what this defense is able to do. And to go back to a point we made earlier, I don't think it's a bad thing they didn't have a player reach double-digit sacks or reach 20 quarterback hits either. Vic does such a good job utilizing everybody over the course of a season, and I don't think it's a coincidence that from week 16 through the Super Bowl, which was 7 total games, that this defense forced 23 turnovers in their final 7 games of the year. And for reference, they had forced just 16 turnovers in the first 14 games of the 2024 season. And even when Philly goes through a bit of adversity in 2025, because guys, let's face it, every team goes through adversity at some point, and I will go on record here with a bold prediction and say that no team will go 20-0, Philly is one of the few teams I really don't worry about because they do nearly everything right from a process standpoint. Hey, Milton Williams, thank you for having a career year and a contract year and help us win a Super Bowl. You want to get paid? Great. Congratulations to you and your family on a 9-figure contract, and we wish you the best. And a lot more often than not, Howie Roseman has the next guy in line ready to step up to do their job. Now, a lot of the time between watching tape, writing script, or recording the videos themselves, that in order for me to buy back time during a busy workday, it's easier for me to order a meal through DoorDash. DoorDash is today's sponsor, and I know I'm not alone on this, but last year when College Football 25 was released, it was much easier to order a meal through DoorDash rather than prep a meal, clean up a meal, and everything along those lines, and DoorDash was very convenient during this time period. We also live in a world where you can have almost anything delivered to your front door, so whether you had a long day at work and you want to get a meal delivered, or maybe you had the flu and you no longer have any medicine, or maybe you're at a hotel and forgot your phone charger, or maybe you're just hanging out with friends, DoorDash can help you. I have a local Mexican place I love to order from, and a lot of the time I simply hit reorder. And DoorDash is your door to move, so download the DoorDash app today to get almost anything delivered, and using code FootballAnalysis50 to get 50% off up to $10 on your first order of $15 or more. Limited time offer. Thank you to DoorDash for sponsoring today's video. Please make sure to download the DoorDash app, and now let's get back into the video. Now, given how dominant the Eagles' defense was last year, it should not come as a surprise that they were in the upper half of really every defensive category in 2024, and honestly, they were closer to being top 8 in everything. They were a complete unit. They only allowed 400 or more yards twice, which was in Week 1 to Green Bay in the Brazil game, and to the Bucs in Week 4, and for both the Packers and Eagles, I am willing to dismiss a lot of the negative things within the Brazil game because of how unique of a game that was to begin with, and also the fact that it was in Week 1 and that each team was still growing together. I don't think there should be an extreme takeaway from a game in Brazil in Week 1 on either side, and that will also apply to the Chargers and Chiefs in September when they play in Brazil this year. And bear with me on this one, but I am also willing to dismiss a lot of the Bucs game in Week 4 as they played that game without A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Lane Johnson, and like we said earlier, multiple things can be true at the same time, and while those three guys were out, Jalen Hurts played probably his worst game of the season in Tampa, and when your quarterback plays bad along with 2 Pro Bowl receivers and a Hall of Fame lineman out, well, you're in for a long day. Now, Jalen of course turned it on later in the year, and there was a reason he won the Super Bowl MVP, and we'll of course get to the offense in a minute. But with not just the Eagles defense, but with every defense, it starts up front. If you are soft up front and you can't consistently stop the run, then really nothing else matters, because at that point you would be an extremely limited team, and teams would run at you until you proved it and basically say, stop us. And Philly finished top 10 in every rushing category defensively last year. And between having Jalen Carter, Moro Ajomo, Jordan Davis, and of course the linebacking unit, Philly has a very complete front seven. Zach Bond had a career year last year, and you can probably say that he won't have as good of a year this year, and you'd probably be right, but the floor of this team's defense is so high, as long as they stay relatively healthy, that they're probably going to be a top 10 unit. Again, and that's probably a conservative guess at that. Philly only had 2 top 100 selections in linebacker Jahad Campbell and safety Andrew Makuba, but I think each player will have a really good rookie season and play a pivotal part in the 2025 Eagles defense. We'll of course dive more into the rookies in a minute, but you can't forget about the 2024 Eagles draft class either, which featured first-round corner Quinyon Mitchell and second-round DB Cooper DeJean. Part of why the Eagles' defense was so good last year was because of what Quinyon Mitchell allowed Vic Fangio to do. And to simplify it as much as possible, Vic would call quarters to the field side and have Quinyon on the backside in a MEG concept, which stands for man everywhere he goes, and have the rest of the defense in a match quarters concept, where DBs are passing receivers off to another, depending on if they run an in-break, an out-break, run a 9, or anything else for that matter, and as an opposing quarterback a lot of the time, you only have 2.3 to 2.6 seconds, sometimes even less, especially with this defense, to make a decision as to where to throw the football. And needless to say, if Quinyon is in a man concept on one side of the field and the rest of the defense is doing something else, combined with the fact that you have guys like Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Jalex Hunt, and everyone else trying to bring the quarterback to the turf, well, you're in a tough position from the start offensively. All of this to say, I have very, very few concerns with the 2025 Eagles defensively as long as they stay relatively healthy. And this, of course, applies to everyone, not just the Birds. I do think it is worth noting they play the Cowboys, Chiefs, Rams, and Bucs in the first 4 games of the year, so they very well may have a few bumps on the road early on, but this is one of the most complete, not just defenses, but arguably the most complete team in all of football. And the bottom line is, the Eagles will figure it out. From a statistical standpoint, I think the Birds will be a top 10 unit defensively, and I can't wait to watch this team play. I hate to be boring in a prediction sense because I don't think anybody is going to have a 15 or 16 sack year and be a true alpha pass rusher. Hassan Reddick had 16 sacks back in 2022, and Philly had 3 other guys have 11 sacks that year, and that was an insane season, and I don't think that's going to be replicated in 2025. That doesn't mean they're going to be bad, of course. I just don't think this team will have 3 or even 4 guys with 50 plus pressures the way they did a couple of years ago. I think it'll look similar to last year with both Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith taking a step forward, and especially Nolan Smith. What is unfortunate for Jalen Carter is he often gets double teamed, and I acknowledge his impact statistically is a lot smaller than his impact on the actual game. Teams game plan around him, and as long as 98 is out there, more often than not, it's going to be a long day for the opposing offense. I think there will be multiple Pro Bowlers from this defense, but I would be kind of surprised if someone wins the DPOY from the Eagles in 2025, and I don't mean that to be disrespectful, because if anything, it's the opposite. It's respect as to how good everyone on this defense is, and how well they perform their jobs. And barring health, they will be one of the best defenses this year, period. Now, the biggest thing with the Eagles 2025 draftees is to have reasonable expectations for them in their rookie season. This is a franchise that had just 2 selections in the top 100 of the 2025 draft, and the reason they only had 2 selections in the top 100 was because they traded a 3rd round pick to the Commanders before the season started so that they could acquire wide receiver Jahan Dotson. Now, for Jahad Campbell, their 1st round pick, this was a linebacking prospect that I absolutely loved, and for reference, I had him at player 5 on my top 150 big board, and for the Eagles to receive a plus 26 draft valuation, because he was number 5 in my big board and was selected at number 31 overall, well, that was just Howie Roseman being Howie Roseman. He sits back, lets the draft come to him, takes the best player available, and walks out of night 1 as, without a doubt, to me, one of the biggest winners of the 1st round. And the same concept can kind of be applied to Andrew Makuba. I had him at player number 60 on my big board. They drafted him at 64, and while a plus 4 draft valuation isn't that big of a steal, I still think Andrew Makuba will be a good player for a long time, and that the Eagles drafted 2 starters with their first 2 picks in Jahad Campbell and Andrew Makuba. One of the biggest reasons I love Jahad Campbell coming out of Alabama was, to me, he was a very low-risk player and a guy that had not only a high floor, but a considerably high ceiling too. I think he will pair very favorably next to Zach Bond, and it is absolutely worth noting that he's not supposed to practice until August because of shoulder surgery he had in the pre-draft process, but to me, this is a player that could very easily start for your franchise for not just a year or 2, but really the next 3 or 4 years, and I don't want to sit here and say that Jahad Campbell will for sure be starting for the Birds in 2029 or 2030, because that is an eternity away in today's NFL, and to predict something 4 or 5 years down the road is an extremely long time. But it is worth noting that Jahad Campbell is just 21 years old, and that he should be here for a while. He's a very good prospect, and he's a player that I think can grow up on this defense and mature as the season goes on, and that there's a very real possibility that him and Zach Bond are one of, if not the best linebacking duos in the entire NFL by season's end. Andrew Makuba, to me, is another high-floor player, and I mean this next part in the absolute best way that I possibly can. But if you are playing Madden, Andrew Makuba is probably one of the last players that you would want to have as a user safety on your team, and what I mean by that is he's your typical cover 3 safety, your free safety that will occasionally come up and play in the box, but given that he is sub 195 pounds, you're not going to want him to go up against Brian Robinson Jr. or any of the bigger backs in the NFL and really take him on one-on-one in the gap. Makuba is a good free safety. He's a considerably rangy free safety at that as well, and whenever you can have a secondary of Makuba, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, and of course Reed Blankenship, guys, this is a really good back end of the defense. And like we talked about with the Birds defense prior to the 2025 rookie section, this is going to be one of the best units in all of football this year. Andrew Makuba is going to be an unsung hero. He's probably going to be a guy that has 3 or 4 interceptions over the course of his rookie season, and to me, Andrew Makuba is the type of guy that everybody wants on their team. He has a high football IQ, he's a high floor player, and a guy that I think Vic Fangio is absolutely going to love. He's probably not going to have the Brian Dawkins type highlight reel over the course of his career, but he's going to be the unsung hero, and he's going to be a good football player for the next couple of years. And I thought the Philadelphia Eagles absolutely killed it with their first 2 picks in Jahad Campbell and Andrew Makuba. Now, like we mentioned at the beginning of the rookie segment part, the biggest thing to have with the Eagles 2025 draftees is reasonable expectations, as they had just 2 selections in the top 100. And I would argue that if you're going to have Mac McWilliams out there or Ty Robinson, that's not necessarily what you want just because you're going to have rookie impact. And I would also argue that if you have any of the players from this class specifically in 2025 have a big impact, that in some ways that could be a negative thing, because that would probably mean that somebody in front of them on the depth chart got injured or was playing very poorly. They, of course, drafted Kyle McCord from Syracuse, and I think that all Birds fans would want Kyle McCord to have a grand total of 0 passing snaps in his rookie season, unless it's in a Week 18 game where he's starting because the Birds are 15-1 entering the game or 14-2 entering the game, and the division is more than wrapped up. Now, I will say that I really love their final 2 selections in Cameron Williams and Antoine Powell-Ryland, and I also really like the undrafted free agent signing of Holland Pierce, an offensive lineman from Rutgers. But with Cameron Williams specifically, I was kind of surprised he came out. I thought he was going to stay another year at Texas, but this was a player that I think that could really go to Jeff Stoutland University and become a future starter with this team. I know there are some questions surrounding guard Tyler Steen, who is entering his 3rd season. I did like Tyler Steen back in the 2023 draft process, and while I don't think Cameron Williams would necessarily start over Tyler Steen in year 1, he's absolutely a guy that could develop along the interior over the next couple of years. Now, I know you may be watching and think that Cameron Williams is 6'5", 335, he is a tackle, but Cameron Williams had pretty slow feet at Texas, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Eagles tried to mold him as a guard at the next level, kind of like they did with Mekhi Becton, who of course was much bigger than Cameron Williams, who's around 6'8", 360. So I do like the potential of Cameron Williams and Holland Pierce too, who is also a much bigger offensive lineman, and Holland Pierce is actually right around Mekhi Becton's size at around 6'8", 345, or even very similar to another tackle on the Eagles roster in Jordan Mailata, but I wouldn't expect much from Cameron Williams or even Holland Pierce in year 1, and if there is one bold prediction that I have for the Eagles 2025 draftees, it is that UDFA Holland Pierce makes the final 53. For Antoine Powell-Ryland, again, this goes back to not necessarily wanting the late round production, because that would mean guys in front of him have not produced to the level they are expected to, but I do like Antoine Powell-Ryland as a guy that could contribute in 2026. For the Eagles 2025 draftees, outside of course, Jihad Campbell and Andrew Makuba, I wouldn't necessarily expect all that much in year 1. With the 2025 Philadelphia Eagles offense, I think the first and foremost thing that we have to note is the offensive coordinating change from Kellen Moore to Kevin Patullo. And the biggest thing to note with Kevin Patullo is, first, I think he's going to be fine, but second, he has been in this organization since 2021. And when Jalen Hurts was a younger player, he definitely struggled hitting throws outside the numbers consistently. And I do remember one specific pick 6 that he threw to Dallas back in 2021 to Trayvon Diggs, and those were the types of throws that Jalen Hurts struggled with early in his career. But as cliche as this is, and oftentimes when we talk about players over the course of their career and projecting guys, and Jaden Daniels right now is a big one for who he will be in 2025 and 26 and beyond, is you automatically assume that a player is going to get better, and that you never assume that a rookie season or a player's second season could be their peak. But this is not wrong to say that Jalen Hurts has progressively gotten better year over year. He's attacked every flaw that he's had in his game year over year, and while the statistical impact that he had in 2024, especially from a passing game standpoint, may not have what it would have been a couple of years ago in 2022, it wasn't required from him because they had a 2,000-yard rusher in Saquon. And how all of this ties in, going from Kellen Moore to Kevin Patullo, is Kevin Patullo's not coming from a collegiate program that runs the air raid offense, where he's basically going to come in and say, hey, Saquon, you ran for 2,000 yards last year. I know you are one of the best backs the league has ever seen from a talent standpoint, but guess what, buddy? We're running an air raid offense this year. We're going to run the ball 30% of the time, and you're going to be lucky to run for 800 yards in 2025. That is not going to be the case. Kevin Patullo knows how the offense should run, he knows how it should look, and he knows the weapons that he has in front of him to work with. This is going to be one of the best offenses in the league, again, barring health, and I have no worries about the Eagles in 2025 as long as everyone stays relatively healthy. And after the Browns game last year, in which the Eagles won 20-16 in a game that some Birds fans were booing head coach Nick Sirianni after, as they were not pleased at the level the Birds were playing at, the Eagles scored over 500 points in the final 16 games, meaning every regular season game plus the 4 postseason games after the Browns game. And I think one of the biggest things to remember for the 2025 Eagles offense is this is a unit that has 10 of 11 starters returning, and what I think favors the offense, not just pertaining to the Eagles, but every offense across the NFL, is is early in the year, the offenses are favored because there is no tape to go off of for the opposing defenses. So you can try every trick play in the book, you can try things that you didn't try in the previous regular season or even the 2025 preseason and get away with it early on because the defenses have no idea how to go against that. Now, gradually the defenses get better over the course of the year, and I think the 2024 Eagles defense is a good example of that, but this is a team that's returning 10 of 11 starters, and they only lost a right guard. They didn't lose a Hall of Fame quarterback. They didn't lose a prime Calvin Johnson to where, man, I don't know how we're going to throw the football this year. They still have one of the best receiving duos in the league in Swole Batman and Skinny Batman and Arthur Juan Brown and Devontae Smith. And they still have, to me, one of the more underrated and underutilized tight ends in the NFL in Dallas Goedert, who unfortunately missed some time last year due to a hamstring and due to a knee injury. This should be one of the better offenses in the NFL, and sure, Saquon's probably not going to rush for 2,000 yards and go back-to-back 2K seasons, but they should still be a top 10 unit by the end of the year. I certainly don't say this about every team, but I don't look at any game on the Eagles' schedule in 2025 and think that, man, they definitively cannot win that game. Now, I do think they are going to go through their fair share of adversity as they have a tough first 4 games, and there's also a 5 or 6 game span at the end of the year where they go to LA to play the Chargers, come home to play the Raiders in December, and with Ashton Genty and the Raiders offensive line, that's certainly not going to be a fun game to play in December. Then they go to Washington, go to Buffalo, and come home to play the Commanders to end the season, and while that 5-game stretch to end the 2025 season certainly isn't going to be fun for the Birds or for any team, I don't look at that stretch and say, man, they are going to be so physically beat up and battered by the time the 2025 postseason starts that they are destined for a wild card round exit. This is a complete team. This is one of the most complete teams in the NFL, period. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if this team goes back to back. They are that good, and there's a reason they outscored the Commanders and Chiefs by a combined 50 points in the NFC Championship game and Super Bowl, and really, if it wasn't for a couple of garbage time touchdowns in the Super Bowl, then it would have been by even more. The Philadelphia Eagles are one of the best teams in the NFL, and there's a very real chance that we go from the Chiefs going back-to-back in 2023 to the Birds going back-to-back in 2024 and 2025. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel as it helps tremendously, and we are closing in on 200,000 subscribers. Thank you to DoorDash for sponsoring today's video, and until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.